Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that your life savings can no longer buy a loaf of bread. The money is still there. The paper still exists. The numbers are still printed on it. But something invisible has disappeared. Trust. And when trust disappears from money, money does not simply lose value. It dies. This is what happened in Germany after the First World War. A modern nation with factories, banks, universities, workers, savings, families, and dreams, watched its currency collapse into nothing. Prices did not just rise, they exploded. People carried money in baskets, bags, and wheelbarrows. Workers were paid twice a day because prices could change before the evening. Families who had saved for decades saw their wealth vanish in weeks. The poor suffered. The middle class was destroyed. The rich survived by holding real assets, and ordinary people learned a terrifying lesson. Money is not paper. Money is belief. This is the story of Weimar Germany, the story of hyperinflation, the story of what happens when money dies. Before we understand how money dies, we have to understand what money really is. Money is not just paper. It is not just metal. It is not just a number in a bank account. Money is a shared belief. You accept a banknote because you believe someone else will accept it tomorrow. A worker accepts wages because they believe those wages can buy food, rent, clothing, and security. A shopkeeper accepts cash because they believe that cash will still have value when they use it later. This belief is what turns paper into money. Without belief, a banknote is just ink. Without trust, currency is just decoration. A society can survive many things: war, debt, political crisis, poverty. But when people stop trusting the money itself, the economy loses its language. Prices stop communicating value. Wages stop protecting workers. Savings stop protecting families. Contracts stop meaning what they used to mean. Because money is the agreement behind almost every other agreement, and when that agreement breaks, everything else begins to break with it. That is why hyperinflation is not just an economic event, it is a social earthquake. It shakes every home, every shop, every market, every workplace, and every institution. And in Germany, after the First World War, that earthquake was about to begin. Germany did not enter hyperinflation as a healthy nation. It entered it wounded. The First World War had drained the country. Millions of soldiers had fought. Families had lost sons, fathers, and brothers. Industry had been redirected toward war. The state had borrowed heavily to finance the conflict. Germany had expected victory. And like many governments at war, it believed the future would pay for the present. But the future did not bring victory. It brought defeat. After the war, Germany faced a broken economy, political instability, social anger, and enormous financial pressure. The empire collapsed. A new republic was born. But the new government inherited an impossible situation. It had to rebuild trust after defeat. It had to pay debts. It had to support veterans, workers, and families. It had to stabilize society. And it had to deal with war reparations demanded by the victors. The country was not just poor, it was humiliated. And humiliation matters, because economies are not built only on factories and banks. They are built on confidence. Confidence in the government, confidence in the future, confidence in the currency, confidence that tomorrow will be more stable than today. In post-war Germany, that confidence was fragile, and once confidence becomes fragile, every crisis becomes more dangerous. The German mark was still money, but the belief behind it had already begun to crack. When a government is trapped between debt, political pressure, weak revenues, and social anger, it faces difficult choices: raise taxes, cut spending, borrow more, default, or create money. Creating money can look like the easiest option. It avoids immediate pain. It allows the state to pay workers. It allows bills to be settled. It allows the government to keep functioning. At first, printing money does not feel like destruction. It feels like survival. That is what makes it so dangerous. Because the first notes printed do not immediately destroy the currency. The first price increases can be explained away. The first warnings can be ignored. People tell themselves it is temporary, a difficult period, a political problem, a post-war adjustment. But every time more money enters the system without a matching increase in real production, the same amount of goods must be chased by more currency. At first, prices rise slowly, then faster. Then people notice. Then they change their behavior. And this is the turning point. Hyperinflation is not only about how much money is printed. It is about what people believe will happen next. When people expect money to lose value, they try to spend it quickly. When everyone tries to spend money quickly, prices rise even faster. When prices rise faster, people trust the currency even less, and the cycle feeds itself. Money loses value because people fear it will lose value. Fear becomes behavior. Behavior becomes reality. Reality becomes panic. At first, printing money looked like a solution. Then it became the disease. Once prices began to move, daily life changed. This is the part of hyperinflation that statistics can never fully explain. A number can tell us that prices rose, but it cannot show what it feels like when the price of bread changes before you reach the bakery. It cannot show a worker running from the factory to the market because their wages will be worth less by evening. It cannot show a mother holding cash in her hands and realizing it cannot feed her children. It cannot show the panic of a society where money no longer measures reality. In Germany, people began to spend money as fast as possible. Saving became irrational. Waiting became dangerous. The moment wages were paid, families rushed to buy food, coal, clothes, anything real, because cash was melting. A banknote in the morning could lose meaning by night. Prices were no longer rising. Reality itself was becoming unstable. This is what happens when money stops doing its job. Money is supposed to measure value. But during hyperinflation, the measuring tool breaks. Imagine trying to build a house with a ruler that changes length every hour. That is what economic life becomes. Contracts become impossible. Planning becomes impossible. Saving becomes impossible. People no longer ask, "How much does this cost?" They ask, "How fast can I get rid of this money?" And when society reaches that point, money has already begun to die. Hyperinflation does not hurt everyone in the same way. The poor were already struggling. They had little savings to lose. The rich often owned land, factories, foreign currency, gold, art, or other real assets. Their wealth could survive outside the currency. But the middle class had savings. Teachers, clerks, shopkeepers, pensioners, small business owners, families who had worked for decades. They believed in stability. They believed in saving. They believed that careful planning would protect them, and that the currency betrayed them. Bank accounts became meaningless. Pensions became worthless. Insurance policies were destroyed. Lifetime savings vanished. This is why hyperinflation creates such deep anger. It does not only make people poorer, It destroys their moral universe. People who worked, saved, obeyed the rules, and trusted the system suddenly discovered that the system had not protected them. A person who had been responsible could end up ruined. A person who had borrowed heavily could benefit. A person who owned real assets could survive. A person who held cash could be destroyed. That feels unfair. And when millions of people experience unfairness at the same time, politics changes. The collapse of money becomes the collapse of trust. Not only trust in currency, trust in government, trust in banks, trust in elites, trust in democracy, trust in the future. The middle class did not simply lose wealth, it lost faith. And when a society loses faith, it becomes vulnerable to dangerous ideas. At the height of the crisis, German money still looked like money. It had numbers, it had official designs, it had the authority of the state printed on it. But society no longer believed in it. And once belief disappears, symbols become absurd. Banknotes were carried in baskets. Money was counted in piles. Children played with stacks of cash. People used notes as wallpaper. Some burned money because it was cheaper than firewood. This is one of the strangest things about currency collapse. The object remains, the meaning disappears. A banknote can still exist physically while dying socially. It becomes a ghost of money. Something that looks familiar, but no longer performs the function that made it valuable. And this reveals a deeper truth. Money is one of the most powerful illusions human beings have ever created. That does not mean it is fake. It means it works because enough people believe in it at the same time. The illusion becomes real through collective trust. But when that collective trust breaks, the illusion ends quickly. And when money dies, people search for substitutes: food, coal, foreign currency, gold, barter, anything that feels more real than paper. The economy begins to move backward. A modern industrial society suddenly rediscovers primitive exchange. Because when official money fails, people return to things they can touch. This is not just economic collapse. It is civilizational regression. Economic collapse does not stay inside the economy. It spreads into politics. When people lose savings, they look for someone to blame. When prices explode, they look for protection. When the future becomes uncertain, they become willing to listen to extreme promises. Hyperinflation did not alone create the disasters that followed in Germany. History is never that simple, but it damaged the foundations of trust. It taught millions of people that the state could fail them. It showed that educated, hard-working, responsible citizens could be ruined by forces they did not control. It made moderation look weak. It made anger feel rational. And once anger becomes rational, radical movements find fertile ground. This is one of the most dangerous lessons of economic history. A currency crisis can become a political crisis. A political crisis can become a crisis of legitimacy. And a crisis of legitimacy can change the destiny of a nation. That is why hyperinflation is never just about prices. It is about what people believe after prices destroy their lives. Do they still believe in institutions? Do they still believe in the future? Do they still believe that the system can be repaired? Or do they begin searching for someone who promises to tear it down? When money dies, trust in institutions dies with it. And the consequences can last for generations. Eventually, Germany's hyperinflation was stopped. A new currency was introduced. Monetary discipline returned. Confidence slowly began to recover. But the damage had already been done. You can replace a currency, you can print new notes, you can change policy, you can stabilize prices, but restoring trust is harder. Because people remember. They remember the day their savings disappeared. They remember the panic in the markets. They remember the feeling of holding money that no longer meant anything. And collective memory shapes national behavior. Germany's later fear of inflation did not come from theory. It came from trauma. The trauma of seeing money die. This is why hyperinflation leaves scars deeper than ordinary recessions. A recession can take jobs. A banking crisis can take savings. But hyperinflation attacks the basic unit of trust that connects society together. It makes people question the value of work, saving, contracts, planning, and government promises. And once those questions enter a society, they do not disappear quickly. They become part of history, part of politics, part of culture, part of fear. The story of Weimar Germany is not only a story about the past, it is a warning about the invisible foundation of every economy. Trust. Trust that wages will buy food. Trust that savings will hold value. Trust that contracts will mean something. Trust that tomorrow will not erase the work of yesterday. When that trust holds, paper can become money. When that trust breaks, money becomes paper again. This is the terrifying simplicity of hyperinflation. The banknote still exists. The number is still printed. The government still says it has value, but society no longer believes. And when society no longer believes, money does not fall. It dies. The lesson is simple but terrifying. Money is not destroyed by fire. It is destroyed by disbelief. And once people stop believing in money, the economy does not simply slow down. It loses its language. Because money is how society speaks about value. And when that language collapses, everything becomes uncertain. Weimar Germany showed the world that a nation can survive military defeat, political chaos, and economic pain. But when money dies, something deeper breaks. The connection between work and reward, between saving and security, between government and trust, between today and tomorrow. That is why this story still matters. Because every modern economy rests on the same fragile belief that the money we hold today will still mean something tomorrow. And history's warning is clear. The moment that belief disappears, money dies. If this story made you think differently about money, inflation, and trust, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to understand how history, economics, and power shape the world we live in today, subscribe to Empire and Economy. Because history does not just show us what happened, it reveals the patterns we are still living inside.